There's no respite yet for Iscon priest Chinmoy Das. His bail hearing was postponed to the 2nd of January after no lawyer turned up to represent him at the Bangladesh court. This comes a day after Iscon yesterday said that Chinmoy Das's lawyer was brutally assaulted and was shifted to the ICU in serious condition. Iscon Kolkata's Vice President Radha Raman Das appealed to the Bangladesh government to ensure safety to the lawyer who is willing to represent Chinmoy Das. Iscon Kolkata's Vice President also advised monks in Bangladesh to exercise caution and practice their faith only in temples and in their homes. He suggested that Bangladeshi monks should avoid wearing saffron clothes and vermilion on their foreheads. He's also said that if monks want to wear saffron strings, they should in fact wear it in a manner that it remains hidden inside their clothes.
तो जब भी बांग्लादेश की जो मैं बात करते रहता हूं निरंतर, तो वहाँ पर वो भी फील करते हैं कि जो वैष्णव क्लोथ में बाहर जाना, हिंदू का कोई भी अगर तिलक उलक लगा रहे हैं, वो बहुत डेंजरस हो चुका है। तो मैं भी उन लोगों को बता रहा था कि बेटर है कि आप जो कंठी है उसको आप लंबा करके पहनिए ताकि गले में ना दिखाई दे। पैंट शर्ट पहनिए, अगर आपका माथा शेवन है तो आप टोपी लगा लीजिए या कुछ ऐसी व्यवस्था करके जाइए कि पता ना चले कि आप वैष्णव हैं। तिलक मत पहनिए, तिलक पानी का तिलक कर लीजिए। तो ये सुरक्षा की दृष्टि से हम लोग भक्तों को एडवाइस कर रहे हैं।
All right, and joining us now, we have a very special guest. With us is Barry Gardner, UK Member of Parliament. Mr. Gardner, thank you so much for joining us here on Times Now. You've raised this matter in the British Parliament. Many other MPs too have raised this. Completely outrageous, the kind of attacks that are taking place. There has been a regime change, but no one thought that the regime change would bring out this wave of brutality that we're seeing happen on ground. What would you analyze would be the reason for it and the reason that the administration is just not able to get a hold on the situation?
Well, look, it's an interim government, and that is clearly difficult until there is a new government in place. But our minister from the UK was visiting just a few weeks ago and made representations about human rights. Now, clearly those representations have not been acted upon. They've been ignored. At the time, there were promises made that a separate group of the police were going to be set up to ensure communal safety and that there was no further violence against the Hindu community. And yet we have heard reports of police and indeed the army standing by and letting these attacks happen. So it's entirely unacceptable. Britain has been supportive of the interim government. We want a peaceful transition of power there to take place. But our support must be conditional on human rights being respected.
Absolutely, and the whole point that's being made over here is of the individual Chinmoy Krishna Das that we're talking about. He's a Hindu monk that was speaking up against the attacks on minorities. He was trying to leave the country. He was arrested at the airport, and since then, shocking incident after shocking incident that's been happening. His lawyer was attacked just because he represented this individual. He had no lawyer today to argue his bail matter. It's obviously a miscarriage of justice that's happening there, and many questions on what the international image will be of Bangladesh if this is the kind of trial or court proceedings that we're going to see.
Well, of course, you're right. Due process in any jurisdiction is absolutely essential. And here it's clear that Chinmoy Das has been denied due process. You will know that my own constituency in the UK is in northwest London, very close to the headquarters of Iscon in the UK at Bhaktivedanta Manor. So many of my own constituents are deeply concerned by this because they've got very many contacts with Iscon.
Absolutely. And in fact, today we've seen Sheikh Hasina come out herself and calling Yunus the mastermind of what's happening there in Bangladesh. Now, politics apart, it's very, very important because she says the only reason I left the country was that violence doesn't spread. But the fact that it's happening so many weeks after I left the country raises very serious questions about the role of Mr. Muhammad Yunus himself. Your view on that?
Well, look, I'm not going to pronounce on that. Muhammad Yunus is an internationally respected figure. As you know, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. But it is very difficult for somebody to come in and get an entire country under control as an interim government. Now, again, I don't wish to pronounce on the previous government and the Awami League, and that's not my place to interfere in the democratic processes of another country. But what is clear is that democracy must be respected. The Constitution of Bangladesh provides protections for minorities, and you know very well that the minority Hindu community in Bangladesh has been decreasing over the past decade from more than 15% now to under 10%. And that is because people have been voting with their feet from the country. They do not feel safe in Bangladesh, and we can see the reason why.
Absolutely. In fact, today it's so shocking to see Iscon has actually issued a statement, Iscon Kolkata, that is to tell monks in Bangladesh that they shouldn't be wearing saffron robes or vermilion, any of the religious identifiers except at their homes and at their places of worship. That clearly shows you that they are being selectively targeted, isn't it?
It does. And of course, saffron is simply an outward display of an inward spiritual condition. What they can never attack is that inward spiritual condition. And of course, the outward display is not what is most important, but it is absolutely objectionable to say that somebody like a senior monk or any adherent of a religion should cover up the symbols of their religious identity in that way. In any country that believes in freedom and tolerance and the respect for religious belief, then that should not be happening.
Mr. Gardner, finally, before I let you go, would you think that this is a fit matter to be taken up before the United Nations? There are demands in India now coming in that the peacekeeping forces, etc., should be called in. Would you suggest or would you think that if the situation doesn't come in control, that would perhaps be the only prudent way to go?
Well, look, I think it's very important that the UN Security Council should be discussing this, because this is a matter of regional security. The last thing we want to see here is this conflict spill over and involve other parties. It's really important that it gets under control, and the United Nations has a key role to play in resolving all such conflicts as this. I have asked our minister to take this up at the United Nations. I hope that the Indian government will do the same, and any other regional actors should also be bringing this before the UN.
Barry Gardner, Member of Parliament of the United Kingdom, thank you so much for taking the time out and speaking to us here at Times Now.